Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave,
on behalf of every father and every mother,
wings for freedom. On behalf
of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have an excellent broadcast for you today. If you could, please do hit the like button on the stream and subscribe to Tochnyi. We do updates every week at 2100 Kyiv at this time, so stay tuned. Also, check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. We do post updates there on social media. And of course, we have our website, Tochnyi.info. There's a lot of great articles there. There's a lot of good interactive maps. So if you want more detailed information about what we're talking about, it's the place to visit, Tochnyi.info. If you guys have any questions in the chat, you're more than welcome to put them in chat, and we'll do our best to answer them at the Q&A section towards the end. And if you guys are watching after the fact, you can put any questions or thoughts in the comments. We'll do our best to respond to them by the next broadcast. First, I will be providing my news report. That will be followed, of course, by Mr. German Aid to Ukraine's report, followed by Stanimir's report on the Russian economy and political situation. And that'll be followed by some extra stuff and then Q&A. So without any delay, I will now start with the news report. These are the main headlines as of July 20th, 2025. First up, we have operations. On the evening of July 17th, an industrial site operated by the Shchikino Azot United Chemical Company in the village of Pervomaysky in the Tula region of Russia was the target of an aerial strike. The facility, known for producing both civilian and defense-related chemical products, sustained damage as a result of the incident. Local residents reported that a methanol container was hit and several production areas were affected. A fire broke out at the location, and footage of the blaze circulated on Russian social media platforms. Unofficial online sources, including the Exile Nova Plus Telegram channel, confirmed the incident and shared screenshots from Russian users referencing the attack. State-aligned media stated that air defense systems had intercepted 3 unmanned aerial vehicles during the event and mentioned scattered debris across the industrial area and nearby settlements. However, these reports omitted any reference to the resulting fire or the scale of the damages. The facility is in the middle of constructing a new complex dedicated to producing ammonia and urea, with capabilities of over 500,000 and 700 tons per year, respectively. Methanol, one of the key substances produced at the site, is essential for various defense applications. It is used in the formation of rocket propellants and aircraft fuel additives, powering electronic systems via fuel cells, and as a chemical base for synthesizing energetic materials. The attack led to the ignition of a distillation column, which lost pressure and intensified the fire. According to Astra, 4 drones were involved, directly impacting key areas of the facility. Among the infrastructure damage were a high-pressure steam line crucial for distributing thermal energy to processing units and the roof structure of a furnace involved in methanol production. Operations at the plant were brought to a complete halt, and all personnel were evacuated as a safety measure. Despite the visible extent of the destruction, official Russian channels have provided only limited acknowledgement of the incident. The regional governor merely noted that UAV remnants were found on the premises of a local business, without identifying the chemical plant by name or referencing the production halt and the damage incurred. In the early hours of July 19th, Moscow was reportedly the target of another wave of aerial attacks, marking the 3rd consecutive night of such incidents. Russian officials stated that 13 drones were intercepted by air defense systems within a span of 2 hours. No casualties or structural damages were officially confirmed. Reports from Russian Telegram channels citing eyewitnesses suggested that some drones were neutralized near Zelenograd, a city located roughly 37 kilometers northwest of Moscow, although these accounts remain unverified by independent sources. The incident follows a series of reported drone strikes across various Russian cities over the preceding 2 nights, including Moscow, St. Petersburg, Belgorod, and Voronezh. On July 18th, explosions were reported in the vicinity of Zvenigorod, Istra, and Zelenograd, according to statements by Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin. Ukrainian officials have not yet confirmed involvement. During a recent operation, Ukraine's State Security Service neutralized a group of operatives working for Russian intelligence who were responsible for the targeted killing of Colonel Ivan Voronich, a senior SBU officer in Kyiv. The mission was personally overseen by SBU Chief Lieutenant General Vasyl Malyuk, who confirmed that the individuals involved had been sent to Ukraine in advance by Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB. Their objective was to carry out the assassination of the SBU colonel, which took place 3 days prior. According to the SBU, the Russian-linked operatives, identified as a man and a woman, had been instructed to monitor Voronich's movements, learn his daily routine, and track his travel patterns. After the surveillance phase, they received information directing them to a hidden weapons cache containing a pistol fitted with a suppressor, which was then used in the attack. Following the killing, the two suspects attempted to go into hiding. However, Ukrainian counterintelligence units, working with the national police, quickly located them in the Kyiv region. A special operation was conducted in the early morning, during which the suspects reportedly resisted capture. In the resulting armed confrontation, both were neutralized. The SBU emphasized in a statement that countering the activities of Russian intelligence networks remains a strategic priority, with a significant proportion of planned attacks by foreign operatives being stopped before their execution. The agency claimed that roughly 85% of hostile plots are disrupted through proactive measures. The killing of Colonel Voronich, which I reported on last week, happened on July 11th in Kyiv's Holosivsky district. Ukrainian authorities have launched criminal proceedings under legislation addressing violent attacks on law enforcement and military personnel. The operation was carried out under the supervision of Ukraine's Prosecutor General's office, and the SBU chief publicly thanked the national police for their cooperation and support in resolving the case. Ukrainian military intelligence operatives reportedly conducted a major cyber operation against Russia's state-owned energy conglomerate Gazprom on July 17th, severely disrupting its digital infrastructure. Sources within Ukraine's main intelligence directorate claim that the attack targeted systems directly linked to Gazprom and its subsidiaries, which are said to contribute to Russia's ongoing war efforts. Although Russian officials and Gazprom have not issued any public statements, the scale of the alleged disruption is substantial, according to Ukrainian intelligence. The cyber attack was said to involve the destruction of large volumes of internal data and the deployment of custom-designed malicious software aimed at damaging Gazprom's core information systems. Ukrainian sources reported that the company's internal IT operations were paralyzed, with nearly 20,000 system administrators losing access. Backup databases were reportedly deleted, and operations at roughly 390 affiliated entities, including Gazprom Teploenergo, Gazprom Oblenergo, and Gazprom Energozbyt, were impacted. The reported damage extended beyond general data loss. Records concerning contracts, supply schedules, tariffs, financial transactions, taxes, licenses, and legal agreements were all allegedly wiped. Critical operational data tied to infrastructure management, such as pipeline pressure levels, costs, oil and gas balances, and well network details, were also said to be destroyed. According to the same Ukrainian source, entire server clusters supporting 1C software, a key enterprise platform used for managing their contracts, analytics, and SCADA systems, were rendered non-functional. Operating systems were reportedly removed or disabled, and firmware on many devices was corrupted, necessitating physical intervention for repair. Alongside the Gazprom operation, Ukrainian cyber units backed by the Ukrainian Cyber Alliance and the BO Team Group also targeted the Gas Car Integration Company, a leading Russian drone manufacturer. This attack reportedly resulted in the complete wipeout of over 47 terabytes of technical data related to drone production, including 10 terabytes of backup files. The breach disabled core functions such as internet connectivity, development operations, and administrative systems at the company. It also affected physical security systems, reportedly locking all standard entrances and forcing personnel to use emergency exits. Extracted files included detailed employee records and full technical documentation on drone manufacturing, which were transferred to Ukraine's defense forces for further analysis. As of the latest available information, the company's operations reportedly remain severely impaired. A new twin-engine combat drone developed by the Ukrainian manufacturer Darts is now being delivered in limited quantities to Ukraine's armed forces, according to a company representative who spoke at a drone demonstration event on July 18th. This upgraded model offers enhanced performance over the earlier single-engine version already in use by Ukrainian troops. The new drone is capable of transporting payloads between 12 and 14 kilograms and has an operational range exceeding 40 kilometers. This is a significant improvement over the original single-engine model, which could carry a maximum of 8 kilograms. The twin-engine design likely provides greater reliability, redundancy, and payload capacity, enabling expanded tactical applications on the battlefield. According to the company representative, while the single-engine model remains in active service, deliveries of the twin-engine variant have now begun in small-scale batches. The company described the original drone as one of the most widely deployed aircraft on the front lines. Up next, we have economy and aid. Australia has officially transferred the first group of 49 decommissioned M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, according to an announcement from the Australian Defence Ministry on July 18th. The tanks were originally pledged in October of 2024, but their delivery was delayed for 9 months, reportedly due to objections from the United States regarding the transfer. The tanks are part of a broader military support package valued at $163 million and were drawn from Australia's soon-to-be-retired stock of M1A1s. Despite early concerns from U.S. officials over the tank's effectiveness on the battlefield and reluctance to approve the export, Washington ultimately granted the necessary permissions for transfer. The U.S. holds legal authority over re-exporting Abrams tanks, and prior to this clearance, it had reportedly cautioned Australia against proceeding with the shipment. Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles emphasized that these tanks will bolster Ukraine's capacity to resist Russia's continued aggression, reiterating Australia's commitment to supporting a lasting peace. Defense Industry Minister Pat Conroy added the tanks were provided at the direct request of the Ukrainian government and expected to significantly enhance Ukrainian military firepower and mobility. Australia's contribution supplements the 31 Abrams tanks previously delivered by the United States in late 2023. The exact operational status of the U.S.-supplied Abrams tanks is unclear as of mid-2025. Australia has indicated that the remaining Abrams units from its pledge will be delivered to Ukraine in the near future, completing the transfer process. The United States has decided to redirect its next production line Patriot air defense system to Germany rather than Switzerland, in a move designed to accelerate the transfer of 2 Patriot batteries from Berlin to Ukraine, according to a July 18th report by the Wall Street Journal citing U.S. officials. This shift follows the U.S. State Department's decision to prioritize Ukraine-bound defense assets, which led Switzerland's defense ministry to announce delays in its expected deliveries. By supplying Germany with a replacement system directly, the U.S. enables Berlin to fulfill its earlier commitment to send 2 Patriot units from its own inventory to Ukrainian forces. The Pentagon's facilitation of this delivery marks the first implementation of a revised U.S. policy on weapons assistance to Ukraine announced by President Donald Trump earlier in the month. To date, the U.S. has supplied 3 Patriot batteries to Ukraine, while Germany has provided 3 more. A European coalition contributed 1 additional system. However, not all units are currently operational due to routine servicing and maintenance requirements. The U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, stated on July 17th that Washington is expediting weapon transfers under the new scheme in response to the deteriorating situation on the ground in Ukraine. The U.S. House of Representatives has once again rejected an amendment introduced by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene that aimed to eliminate funding for Ukraine from the 2026 Department of Defense Appropriations Act. According to the official record from the Office of the Clerk, the amendment was overwhelmingly voted down, with only 76 members in favor and 353 opposed. Every Democrat in the House voted against the measure, while Republican support was split, with approximately 1/3 voting in favor and the remaining 2/3 joining Democrats in opposition. The result demonstrates the consistent and broad bipartisan backing in Congress for continued U.S. assistance to Ukraine. Greene has made repeated efforts to halt U.S. support for Ukraine, but her initiatives have failed to gain traction among the majority of lawmakers in either party. France and Italy have opted out of the new NATO initiative designed to finance and deliver U.S.-made weapons to Ukraine, according to reports from Politico and La Stampa on July 16th, citing unnamed officials in both governments. The plan involves NATO purchasing advanced American weaponry, particularly air defense systems, and providing selected equipment to Ukrainian forces. Despite France's long-standing support for Ukraine, French officials explained that their government declined to join the program due to President Emmanuel Macron's strategic focus on strengthening Europe's defense industrial base. Specifically, Macron has been advocating for European nations to prioritize the acquisition of domestically manufactured arms rather than relying heavily on U.S. systems. Budgetary pressures and increasing national defense spending targets also contributed to France's decision. Italy adopted a similar stance. Italian officials cited fiscal constraints and the country's preference for alternative defense technologies, such as the Italian-French-developed SAM-T air defense system, which has already been supplied to Ukraine. Sources from the Italian Defense Ministry explain that this decision does not indicate a withdrawal of support for Ukraine, and instead it reflects a preference to explore other forms of assistance. Italy is currently considering a NATO request to assist with logistics for U.S.-supplied arms deliveries to Ukraine by providing air, rail, or sea transport. Rome has indicated its willingness to contribute in that capacity, although the extent of its involvement remains under review. Meanwhile, the Polish defense minister criticized the financing model of the new initiative, arguing that European taxpayers should not bear the financial burden of U.S. weapons procurement for Ukraine. He proposed that the costs instead be covered using frozen Russian state assets. This suggestion was reportedly raised during a meeting of EU foreign ministers. The new NATO-led arrangement, strongly supported by Germany, was devised as a workaround to Trump's reluctance to endorse direct U.S. military assistance to Ukraine. Germany has taken a leading role in the initiative, and the Chancellor emphasized that the program aligns with Europe's strategic interests and is intended to increase pressure on Russia to enter negotiations. Several other European countries, including the UK, the Netherlands, and Nordic states, have also endorsed the initiative. Trump stated on July 15th that deliveries of Patriot missile systems and other weapons are already in progress under this framework, addressing Ukraine's urgent need for enhanced air defenses amid intensified Russian aerial assaults on civilian areas. On July 18th, the European Union approved its 18th sanctions package targeting Russia in response to the ongoing invasion of Ukraine, marking one of the bloc's most extensive and forceful measures to date. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kallas described the package as a significant escalation in economic pressure on Moscow, particularly in light of Russia's continued rejection of ceasefire efforts and its intensified aerial bombardment of Ukrainian cities. Key elements of the package is the reduction of the price cap on Russian seaborne crude oil exports from $60 to 47.6 per barrel. Originally introduced by the G7 in 2022 to reduce Russian energy revenues without destabilizing global markets, this revised cap is now supported by both the EU and the UK. The move is designed to further restrict the Kremlin's access to oil revenue, which remains a central funding source for the war effort. New measures also include actions against 105 vessels involved in Russia's shadow fleet, which is used to circumvent international shipping restrictions. Additional sanctions target the Russian financial sector, including institutions facilitating sanctions evasion and extending Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea, which are now formally banned from being used. In a notable first, the EU is imposing sanctions on a national flag registry as well as Rosneft's largest Indian refinery. The package also targets individuals involved in re-education programs affecting Ukrainian children and includes new export controls aimed at restricting technology used in military drone production. Sanctions on Russian oil products routed through third-party countries have also been tightened. A long-standing exemption allowing the Czech Republic to import Russian oil has been lifted following Prague's declaration of full independence from Russian energy. The latest package adds 14 individuals and 41 entities to the EU's sanctions list, increasing the total number of listings since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022 to over 2,500. These new targets span Russia's defense industry, banking sector, and energy sector. Ukraine welcomed the development. The Prime Minister called it the most comprehensive sanctions package so far, saying each measure further weakens Russia's ability to sustain the war. Slovakia's approval was instrumental in advancing the package after multiple vetoes. Prime Minister Robert Fico, whose administration has often echoed Kremlin-aligned positions, ultimately backed the sanctions after receiving written guarantees from the European Commission about how the phase-out of Russian gas would be managed to protect Slovak energy interests. Fico stated that prolonging opposition would no longer serve Slovakia's needs. Up next, we have international relations. On July 17th, Ukraine's parliament confirmed Yulia Sverdenko as the new prime minister, marking a significant leadership transition in the country. Sverdenko, a 39-year-old economist and the former first deputy prime minister and economy minister, was nominated by President Zelensky to succeed Denis Shmyhal, who served for 5 years. Her appointment was backed by 262 lawmakers, while 22 voted against and 26 abstained. Parliament also approved the composition of her new cabinet with 254 votes. In her first statement, Sverdenko outlined her priorities, reinforcing Ukraine's resilience across military, economic, and social domains, and delivering measurable improvements to citizens' daily lives. On the same day, Shmyhal was confirmed as the new defense minister with 267 votes in support, replacing Rustem Umerov. Umerov is reportedly under consideration to lead the National Security and Defense Council. In his remarks to Parliament, Shmyhal pledged to enhance Ukraine's military readiness, review all existing defense agreements with international partners, and deepen defense cooperation. President Zelensky, addressing lawmakers before the votes, thanked Shmyhal for his previous service and emphasized the need to review Ukraine's foreign defense agreements in preparation for a new phase of military aid and diplomatic engagement. He also stressed the importance of revising Ukraine's diplomatic strategy towards Washington, given ongoing developments in U.S. foreign policy. As part of the new diplomatic push, Deputy Prime Minister Olha Stefanishyna was appointed as a special envoy to the United States. Zelensky noted that she will maintain momentum in bilateral relations while her candidacy for ambassador is under review by U.S. authorities. Other key personnel and structural changes were introduced. Outgoing Strategic Industries Minister Herman Smetany will take over leadership of Ukroboronprom, the state defense enterprise, as the Strategic Industries Ministry is dissolved. Its responsibilities will be absorbed by the Defense Ministry. Mikhailo Fedorov, the current Minister of Digital Transformation, will serve as First Deputy Prime Minister. Alexei Kuleba will retain his dual role as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Communities and Territories. The Economy, Ecology, and Agriculture ministries will be consolidated into one entity, led by Alexei Sobolev, formerly Sverdenko's deputy. Taras Kachka will replace Stefanishyna as Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. The Social Policy Ministry will be renamed to include family and unity responsibilities and will be led by Denis Ulyutin, the first Deputy Finance Minister. Svetlana Hrinchuk, the former Ecology Minister, will take over the energy portfolio, replacing Herman Halushenko, who will shift to the Justice Ministry after facing prior criticism over his performance in the energy sector. Several ministers will remain in their roles, including the Foreign Minister, the Veterans Affairs Minister, the Education Minister, Health Minister, and Youth and Sports Minister. Under Ukraine's semi-presidential system, the president nominates the prime minister as well as the defense and foreign ministers, who must be confirmed by parliament. The prime minister then proposes other cabinet members, subject to parliamentary approval. The legislature remains under the control of Zelensky's Servant of the People Party, which has ensured relative cohesion in the confirmation process. On July 15th, Ukraine's parliament passed legislation to suspend the country's participation in the 1997 Ottawa Convention, which prohibits the use, production, stockpiling, and transfer of anti-personnel landmines. The bill received broad support in the Verkhovna Rada with 305 votes in favor, 40 abstentions, and no votes against. Later that day, President Zelensky signed it into law, making it official. Zelensky also ratified 2 additional pieces of legislation, one permitting multiple citizenship and another approving the creation of a special tribunal with Europe for prosecuting Russian aggression. I covered that last week. The suspension of Ukraine's military obligations under the Ottawa Treaty signals a major shift in military policy. The Ottawa Convention, signed by over 160 countries, was designed to protect civilians from long-term harm caused by anti-personnel mines. However, Zelensky has argued that Ukraine must adapt its strategy to counter Russia's military actions. He pointed out that Russia has never been a party to the treaty and has extensively used these weapons during its full-scale invasion, leaving Ukrainian forces at a tactical disadvantage. According to Zelensky, the ability to deploy certain types of weapons, specifically anti-personnel mines, is necessary to establish a level playing field in defensive operations. The legal withdrawal process under Article 20 of the Ottawa Treaty requires 6 months' notice to the United Nations and prohibits formal exit if the country is still engaged in armed conflict at the end of that period. Seems like a weird legal requirement if you're being invaded, but oh well. The change in Ukraine's stance comes amid a broader regional shift. In March, the Baltic states and Poland announced similar intentions to exit the treaty, citing growing concerns over national security and the threat of a Russian invasion. The United States, which is not a full signatory to the Ottawa Convention, approved the transfer of anti-personnel mines to Ukraine in 2024. On July 17th, Europol and Eurojust announced the dismantling of the pro-Russian hacker group No Name 057, which had been involved in a series of cyber attacks targeting Ukraine and numerous European countries. The multinational law enforcement operation, dubbed Eastwood, was conducted between July 14th and 17th and involved authorities from 12 countries, including Czechia, France, Finland, Germany, Italy, Lithuania, Poland, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and the United States. All the cool guys. The group had been active since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, openly expressing support for Moscow and directing its attacks primarily at Ukraine and countries aligned with Kyiv, many of which are NATO members. The hackers frequently employed distributed denial-of-service techniques to flood websites and critical digital infrastructure with traffic, rendering them inoperable. The operation led to a takedown of a vast network of over 100 computer systems used to conduct attacks and manage the group's core operations. Authorities successfully disabled much of the central server infrastructure that supported the group's cyber activities. 2 arrests were made during the operation, one in France and another in Spain. Germany issued 6 arrest warrants targeting suspects based in Russia, including 2 individuals identified as key organizers of the group. In total, 7 arrest warrants were issued for 6 Russian nationals. European security agencies attributed dozens of cyber incidents to No Name 057, many aimed at critical infrastructure sectors, including energy providers, transportation networks, arms manufacturers, and government agencies. In Germany alone, the group carried out 14 attacks affecting around 230 organizations. Their activity escalated during sensitive political moments, such as the European Parliament elections. Additional targets included government and financial institutions in Sweden and municipal websites in France. The joint effort by international law enforcement and judicial bodies marks a major step in countering politically motivated cyber operations tied to Russian national interests. On July 14th, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that the United States will allegedly impose sweeping tariffs on Russia unless a deal to end the war in Ukraine is reached within 50 days. Speaking alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House, Trump warned of very severe tariffs, potentially reaching 100%, which he described as, quote, secondary tariffs. Trump expressed dissatisfaction with Russian President Vladimir Putin, stating that he had expected a peace deal to be finalized 2 months prior. He reiterated his stance of detachment from the war, framing it as a crisis inherited from the Biden administration. His remarks come amid intensified Russian missile and drone strikes across Ukrainian cities, following repeated rejections by the Kremlin of Western calls for a ceasefire. The proposed 100% tariff threat falls short of a bipartisan bill in the U.S. Senate that seeks to levy a 500% tariff on imports from nations continuing to buy Russian oil and raw materials. While Trump's statement signals a hardening stance, it stops short of aligning with the more punitive legislative proposals under consideration in Congress. European officials responded cautiously. EU Foreign Policy Chief Collis welcomed Trump's firmer tone on Russia, but criticized the 50-day deadline as overly generous in light of ongoing civilian casualties caused by Russian attacks. She emphasized the urgency of accelerating pressure on Moscow to force progress toward a resolution. I guess we'll see in 50 days if this was a meaningful shift in Trump's approach or if we'll all be eating tacos. As of July 15th, a new Finnish law has come into effect banning Russian and Belarusian citizens from purchasing real estate in Finland, a move aimed at reinforcing national security amid growing concerns over Russian activity in the region. The law, originally approved by Finland's parliament in April, grants the Ministry of Defense the authority to block property transactions involving the citizens of countries deemed potential security risks. Finnish Defense Minister Antti Hakkinen announced the law's activation on social media, emphasizing that it is intended to safeguard Finland against external influence operations. He noted that the reform is long overdue and should have been implemented even before Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022. Under the legislation, Russia and Belarus have been officially designated as countries subject to the restriction. This classification was finalized through a government resolution following the law's passage. The measure replaces Finland's earlier case-by-case system, where individual property deals involving Russian nationals could be blocked only if the Ministry of Defense specifically identified them as a security threat. The new framework imposes a general ban, streamlining enforcement and removing ambiguity. The real estate restriction is part of a broader national security agenda that Finland has adopted in response to the evolving regional threat landscape. Over the past year, Finland has closed its land border with Russia, accusing the Kremlin of orchestrating hybrid operations that involve directing asylum seekers toward Finnish territory, and more recently, Finland exited the International Anti-Landmine Treaty, citing the need to reassess its defense posture in light of Russia's military actions. And last item this week, Ukraine has recovered the remains of 1,000 individuals believed to be Ukrainian citizens and soldiers under a repatriation agreement with Russia concluded during talks in Istanbul. The coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war announced this on July 17th. The deal was originally struck on June 2nd during the peace discussions held in Istanbul and outlined the repatriation of approximately 6,000 Ukrainian bodies. The phased return process was completed by June 16th with a total of 6,057 remains received by Ukraine. According to Ukrainian authorities, some of the bodies included in the exchange were identified as Russian soldiers. In response, Ukraine returned 3 of these Russian combatants' remains to Russia. The latest announcement coincided with comments from Vladimir Medinsky, the head of the Russian delegation in Istanbul, who stated that Ukraine also transferred 19 Russian bodies during this round. While the broader repatriation agreement was fulfilled, both sides have continued to exchange smaller numbers of remains and prisoners in parallel with ongoing negotiations. Despite these limited humanitarian agreements, broader peace talks between the two countries in May and June in Istanbul did not yield significant progress toward a ceasefire or long-term settlement. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Hello guys, that would be me. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. On Wednesday, I made public that the German drone manufacturer Quantum Systems will open its second production facility in Ukraine. Not the first, the second already. The managing director of Quantum Systems Ukraine, Alexander Berezhny, announced in Bild that a second production facility will be opened in Ukraine already in September 2025, so in just a few weeks. Most likely, the opening of a second site, primarily for the production of vector drone systems, is a consequence of Quantum Systems' announcement in February 2025 that the company will double its production capacity in Ukraine this year. However, exact details, for example, the amount of money to be invested in the new factory, how many employees will work for Quantum Systems in Ukraine once the factory is up and running, and what production capacities will soon be reached, are understandably a secret. On the same day, financed by the German government, the German Society for International Cooperation, GITS, handed over 4 Volkswagen Amarok vehicles, which were used by the, sorry in advance, Oblavokatska Canal Utility Company, the Defense Department of the Zaporizhia Regional State Administration, and the, again, sorry in advance, Komunarski and Dnipropetrovsky District Administrations. Jesus Christ. What hard names, guys. And last but not least, on Thursday, very good news, it became known that Belgium will once again contribute 140 million euros to the German Enduring Action on Air Defense initiative to strengthen the Ukrainian air defense forces. Last year, they have contributed 200 million euros in additional air defense equipment. This year, in addition to the 140 million euro they are planning to contribute in financial assistance, they are offering to provide one of their 7 Belgian Airbus A400M transport aircraft to transport equipment from the United States to Ukraine. So we all know what that means. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. German. So up next, we go to Russia, where, every week I think, it's going to finally calm down in Russia. Things will get into some kind of weird new normal for them. But it seems fate doesn't have that in store for them because there's always something crazy happening in Russia lately. So, Mr. Stanimir, we've got a few things to talk about this week. The first I know that you wanted to talk about was the new law that was passed in Russia about searching online for extremist activity. So like way back when, there was a time in Russia when the internet wasn't super heavily policed. But now I think since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and even before that, I would say the screws have been tightening. And I think this represents one of the final steps in that process where it looks like now they're really, really going after people. So I'll let you explain the details. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it was actually passed in the second reading. There should be a third reading of the law, so it's not fully passed, but it was snuck in on the night before they were going to vote in the second reading of a law that has nothing to do with this. And so it was passed in as an amendment, and it was voted by, I think, everyone except 20 or 30 deputies. And the idea is that it's very broad. It bans searching for anything that's extremist content. And it doesn't mean extremist content that is listed on Russian websites, that this is on Russian government sites, that this is specifically extremist content. It can be viewed as even looking for people who are involved in any way in extremist content. And I have to point out that, let's say, Facebook is banned for being an extremist content platform in Russia. So looking for Facebook, or let's say WhatsApp, which is Russia's biggest messenger, can count as a form of extremist content.
Yeah, like up until this point, it seems like Russia has been using this discrediting the armed services rule or law that they passed to go after people. But this sounds like it could represent, as you said, kind of based on the categorization. That's one way they discredit most foreign like ideas and organizations and things. They label it extremism, and that's how they. So it's a very technical term in the Russian like law, and they use it pretty much to like label organizations they don't like, right? So as you said, it's a very like it means most Russians I think would be guilty on some level of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that extremist content isn't just foreign things. It's also a lot of Russian groups which were declared extremist after 2022, which had been popular before that. And again, I have to point out that under the Russian Constitution, Article 49, there shouldn't be any censorship of content in Russia of this kind. But again, this is something that I think the Russian Constitutional Court is going to sleep on again.
I think the one question I might have about this is like, does the Russian state, I think one of the reasons up until recently they had been ignoring this is that a lot of the people in charge just kind of didn't understand. I think it's sort of rumored that Putin doesn't really know much about computers or care much about computers or use the internet or anything like that. So I wonder if they actually have the capacity to monitor the internet meaningfully and go after people for this. And especially now when there's such a shortage of like IT workers and labor in general, but then specifically a bunch of IT workers fled the country. Like, do you think they can genuinely set up like a serious thing here, or probably it's just a matter of like getting this on the books and going after a few people to make an example of them?
No, they can actually enforce it, because with Yandex under control of groups close to the Kremlin and with VK being under control of Russia, that is the bulk of Russians' internet activity. Either they're searching for something on Yandex, either they have a Yandex account, or they have a VK account or a Klasnik account, so they can track most of your searches during the day, so most of your presence on social networks. Now, what I think this was focused on beforehand is that a lot of Russian groups in exile started offering VPNs to avoid Russian blocks of data. So you can watch, for instance, your favorite Russian podcaster on YouTube. Now he has a VPN network that he offers to sell. So that's why this was packaged with a ban on the advertisement of VPNs within Russia. And I think that was the initial thing that they wanted to ban. These groups had actually focused on providing VPNs as a source of income for them and as a way for people to see their content so their numbers go up. And the secondary use, however, is going to be probably more dire, because people like Margarita Simonyan and Mizulina actually spoke out against it because they feared it's going to ban everything. And this can be interpreted as banning everything that's outside of Russia in terms of search content. They have the means to track your search history through the browser that Yandex offers, through Yandex search platform if you're logged in, through, like I said, their main social networks. And there's a prosecutor general who is willing to go after anything recently.
Yeah, so I think this is a real, like you said, VPNs are now illegal, right? You're not allowed to search for things, most things, and then they have this concept of like the sovereign internet, where in theory they can close off their internet from outside sources or even shut it down, like if there was a situation where the Russian state thought it was necessary, right? So it seems like it kind of represents the final, I don't know, like goal of the Russian state, since they kind of got scared of this internet thing, right? That they've mostly taken control of it. Yeah, or do you think there's still a ways to go?
There's still a ways to go. So VPNs aren't specifically banned. It's what's banned and what's subject only to fines for now, so no prison time, is advertising VPNs that with the aim of circumventing Russian online blocks of sites. So there's still a ways to go. I don't think they're also ready to completely shut off their internet from the rest of the world. That takes a bit more work. But like I said, the other thing, tracking this, they're capable.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Stanimir. We'll definitely keep people posted on what's going on, but it seems like a pretty significant law that was passed. Okay.
I have a question, quick question for Stanimir. So, do you think that Russian war bloggers and all these various groups that fundraise through Telegram posts and also post on Telegram for propaganda reasons, you think they're going to go away? Because it seems like a lot of their aim is to spread fear and like, if you take the example of Human Safari, you have this Alex Osmidomitil guy that is mainly posting to spread fear on the Ukrainian side. Do you think it's going to affect those people, or do you think they're going to get a pass?
I would say it depends, because some of them have gotten a pass and some of them have been arrested. Some people who are in that, let's say, war blogger spectrum in Russia. It's not clear cut, but the other thing that might happen is they might get cut off Telegram entirely, because Telegram might be dropped as a platform for Russians. They might be asked to switch to Max, the new messenger that they're creating for government purposes.
Okay, so I take that as there might be a case where certain groups are getting a pass or kind of a license to continue to do what they're doing now, if the government wants to.
Yeah, they can look away, but they will have always something that they can use to fine you or send you in jail. That's their practice.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so next topic is Russian airports. I think Stanimir's been covering this pretty regularly. It's obviously a very dire situation. The airports weren't doing great to begin with due to sanctions and just lack of like international travel to Russia and things like that. And then to layer on top of all of the other problems they were facing, they're now dealing with this issue where Ukrainian drones are hitting Moscow and St. Petersburg and all the major airport hubs areas. And they aren't actually hitting the airports, but they're hitting the areas where they are. And therefore, Russia throws up all this electronic warfare as a countermeasure. And that means the planes can't fly because it's too dangerous. So it's caused these huge backups in Russian airports, and it's caused a major revenue loss for the airline companies. So, Stanimir, I think we've had yet another week of terrible, terrible news for the airports. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what happened was that there had been, over the weekend, 8 bans on travel via airplane for the airports around Moscow, primarily Sheremetyevo and Vnukovo, less so on Domodedovo, but that meant that 134, and these are preliminary numbers, 134 planes had to be diverted to other airports. And like I say, the reserve airport for Moscow might end up being Pulkovo in St. Petersburg. So you can't really travel back to the destination you're going to. You're not being diverted to something that's 100 kilometers away. That's just not happening in Russia. And what happened was that over the day today, there were another 3 interruptions of air travel. So on top of those 134 planes that were diverted, there were cancellations. There were delays. People had been delayed something like 20 hours. Some of the people that were complaining. In one case, I saw that a plane that was coming to Moscow from Istanbul flew out to Moscow, got to Minsk, was told to turn back, went back to Istanbul. Then in several hours, it was told that Moscow is okay again, flew out, got to Minsk again, and then got hit by another ban on travel at Moscow and had to travel back to Istanbul. And they were waiting for a third attempt to get to Moscow. So they're severely inconvenienced. In Vnukovo, they actually ran out of space for people to sit, so they started giving out mats to lie down on the ground. Yeah, this is going to become the new normal for Russia because it wasn't caused by a lot of drones. It was caused by, I think I counted 26 drones that were flying over Moscow region. That's the entire number. And that caused a delay for 2 days over the weekend during the busy summer period when everyone wants to travel.
Yeah, it seems like a real disaster for both the Russian economy and obviously the Russian airline industry in particular. I don't really, I can't say much more than that. I don't see how this is sustainable. The most I see happening is they're going to try to spin this into some kind of patriotic thing where, like, if you complain about it, then you're not being patriotic. But that's the most they can do here. I mean, their hands are really tied in terms of like the actual practical economics of it, right?
Yeah, and like I said last week, I think I posted it. I didn't say it because the news came out later. The estimate was that Russian airlines lost between 17 and 23 billion rubles in that day alone. So that is close to $250 million in just 2 days. And we're looking at probably a similar figure with all the flights that being delayed, with all the hotel bookings, with flights being delayed 2 or 3 days, and the airlines having to give some vouchers for hotel bookings, for food, for water. I think the figure will be in the same range.
Yeah, I feel like they must have some limited options here, but I just can't see. I don't really see a way out of this for them. So it's a pretty dire situation. So I guess we'll keep an eye on that as well. And yeah, more bad news for Russia, I guess, in a parade of it. So now, Stanimir, I think we'll go now to your general report on the Russian economy, which is, I assume, another situation with some bad news. So yeah, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so we'll start with the main news from this week. So the Russian government will write off the debt of 25 regions, which is worth 43 billion rubles. At the start of the 2025 year, Russian regions had a total debt of 3.15 trillion rubles, of which around 2.46 trillion rubles is debt to the Russian federal government. So that's how small the write-off is this time, when you compare it to the big number as a whole. The Russian state stopped purchasing cars as much as it did last year. So in the first half of 2025, they decreased purchases of cars and LCVs by 15%. Purchases from gas were decreased by 21%, from AvtoVAZ by 20%, and most importantly, from WAZ by 40%. And here I have to say, for the WAZ Patriot and WAZ, as you call it, Bukhanka, the primary buyer is the Russian military. So that's probably a decrease by the purchase by the Russian MOD. And the final main news that I have for this week is that the Russian railway, its far eastern part, saw that container traffic decreased by 6.3% in 2025, another decrease of Russian railway traffic. And it's linked to, this time it must be congestion, because it's container traffic which is prioritized by Russian railways. In total, 568,000 TEU were transported by the Russian Far East Railway. In banking, I want to address the story by Bloomberg that Russian banks went to the Russian government talking about a possible need for a bailout in 2026. Now, I don't think those are the main banks, like, let's say, VTB and Sberbank, because they have a lot of profits and they're saving half of those profits or even more for a rainy day and to increase their own capital. But overall, there is merit to that, because for a long time, Russian banks were focusing on very low quality borrowers, and delinquency rates among those are rising. We also saw that a lot of commercial real estate companies are failing to service their debts, and Russian banks are wary of going to bankruptcy court with them, because then they'll have to manage an office building or a mall that they can't actually operate properly. And even with the increased interest rate, the one segment of borrowing that kept rising was corporate borrowing, and the SME, so that is small and medium enterprises, have a record high debt. So there is a lot of things to worry about if you're a bank looking into contractions that are possible in 2025 and 2026, or slowdowns. Now, the overall volume of overdue debt owed by Russian individuals in H1 2025 increased to 1.5 trillion rubles, and it's the highest it's been in the last 6 years. And in May 2025, it was 400 billion rubles more than in May 2024. So it's growing by something like 50% every year. And it might grow even faster every half a year, and might grow faster even in the remaining of this year. It has a share of the total borrowing of Russian individuals of 5.7%. However, Russian banks, again, are saved by their profits, and for June 2025, they had 392 billion rubles in profit, which is 33% higher than in May 2025. So on that front, if they save those profits and they don't issue dividends, some of them can weather a storm. Now, when it comes to commodities, we have grain, with Russia's wheat harvest starting late this year because of the drought and the torrential rains in certain areas. The Russian harvest is 56% behind, 56% lower than last year at the same point. So they might make up some of it by just recovering their pace and harvesting more, or to a later duration, to a later period. But the other problem is that some of the harvest yield has fallen significantly in certain areas, and that might lead to lower grain harvest this year than it was initially predicted, and that was already lower than 2023 and 2024. Now, when it comes to metals, the Magnitogorsk Iron and Steel Works said that its steel production for the first half of 2025 decreased by 18.2%, and its cast iron production decreased by 8.8%. For the cast iron production, that was due to overhauls of a furnace and improving their equipment, but for steel, it was entirely linked to the lack of demand on the market for Russian steel. When it comes to coal, the Russian Energy Ministry said that there are 51 coal producers that are closing down or on the verge of closing down soon. I have to point out that in the Kuzbas, which has, I think, over 50% of Russia's coal mining, there are a total of 151 companies that are in the Russian coal sector. So 51 coal producers is a significant figure. And the Russian Ministry of Finance approved deferment of taxes and insurance premiums for workers until November 30th, 2025, last week. When it comes to oil and gas, this week we saw the data for the Russian oil taxes for July. They'll be set at 12,428 rubles per ton and 1,695 rubles per barrel. For comparison, this is higher than June, when it was 10,505 rubles per ton and 1,433 rubles per barrel. But it's far from February, which is where they want to stay at, when it was 1,872 rubles per ton and 2,551 rubles per barrel. So additionally, in May, we have data for May for EU purchases of Russian oil, which was worth 407 million euros. But again, the primary buyer here is Slovakia with 205 million euros and Hungary with 201 million euros. So almost everything when it comes to EU purchases of oil was bought by Hungary and Slovakia when it comes to Russian oil. Japan, for the first time since February 2023, bought Russian oil. However, they bought it at a price that was below the cutoff price of $60. They paid $57.5 per barrel, and the entire shipment was worth 25.3 million USD. So that was only 0.7% of all commodities that Japan purchased in June. It was a tiny figure, but it's symbolic and it still matters. So the Russian government also decided this week to start working on changes to the Russian fuel subsidies. So there are cutoff points. So if the Russian price of diesel and gasoline deviate, so for gasoline it's 10% from the baseline at which the subsidies are paid, and for diesel it's 20%, then subsidies are unpaid. So if it's 10% higher than the set norm and 20% higher than the set norm for diesel, subsidies are unpaid. And now the Russian government wants to make it easier for Russian companies that produce fuel to earn subsidies, and they're raising those from 10 to 15% for gasoline and from 20 to 25% for the deviation for diesel fuel. When it comes to the construction market, this week we only have the cement news, but it's pretty major. So for the first half of 2025, Russian cement demand fell by 8.6% and production by nearly 10%. And this is primarily caused by the reduction in the infrastructure spending by Russia, and also the falling housing construction and the housing market. Now I have interesting data points. So we again have stories about Russian alcohol. It continues to fall in terms of sales compared to 2024. Vodka sales were down 5% when it comes to retail sales, and cognac sales were down 10% again when it comes to retail sales in the first half of 2025. This, coupled with production being down, suggests that demand for alcohol, because of the high new excise tax, is dropping and continues to stay low, at least lower than it was last year. Also, the Russian government will set aside 765 billion rubles for the development and production of aircraft in Russia. This is going to be spent over the next 6 years. This is lower than their initial estimate, which is in the trillions. But again, it's still a significant number that they're going to spend on civilian aircraft construction, which seems to be lagging behind significantly. And also, Russians are laying hands en masse this week. This is because the price of eggs fell below their point of profitability, so they had to kill part of the stock that was laying eggs to recover the egg wholesale prices from 2 rubles per egg in June to 3.5 rubles in July. This might be shocking people, as last year or the year before that we had an egg crisis, and now egg prices seem too low, but it's because over this time the cost to produce eggs has actually gone up rather than stayed at the same lower level as it was 2 years ago. Russian imports of South Korean cars in June 2025 were worth $84.7 million. This is 80% higher than in June 2024. And for the first half of 2025, the growth in the purchases of Korean cars was 40%. So that's significant, but I have to say that it's primarily of cars that are between 1.5 and 3 liters. And because there's a Korean ban on the sale of cars over, I think, 1.8 liters, that is in practice just cars between 1.5 and 1.8 liters in terms of engine volume. So additionally, the market for Russian luxury cars grew by 19% to 320 cars, and these are primarily imported cars. So the biggest growth was by Rolls-Royce, which grew by 56% to 100 cars. These are again parallel imported, and this is to show that the Russian elite is still able to access luxury even if it's at a higher price point. And some news from the Russian regions. In Caucasia, we saw that the local government has difficulty paying its teachers on time. So they started delaying the salaries of Russian teachers in Caucasia. They were supposed to be paid at the end of June or the second half of June, but now they're going to be paid probably tomorrow on Monday because the money was transferred only last week at the end. So yeah, Russian regions have trouble paying salaries to vital workers like school teachers. And for the first half of 2025, we saw that 2.73 million used cars were sold in Russia. This is 0.5% lower than for the first half of 2024, but it's expected that by the end of 2025, the used car sales market will fall by either 3% in the baseline or by as much as 7% in the pessimistic scenario of Russian analysts when it comes to looking at the market. Another interesting story is that WhatsApp, which is, like I said, Russia's most popular messenger with 84.4 million users, has been threatened by the Duma that it should be leaving the country and that it might be banned soon in a new legislative measure to force Russians to adopt the new state messenger Max, which is developed by VK. When it comes to Russian clothing and footwear, we saw some news this week. So for the last 12 months, 4.3% of the companies that were doing retail of clothing and footwear closed down. And there are only 7,100 legal entities remaining in the sector. Now there are this many because 96% of the companies actually operate 1 or 2 stores and not more. And overall visits to clothing and footwear shops in Russia in the first half of 2025 dropped by as much as 9%, purchases dropped by 7%, and stores that focus entirely on fashion accessories and clothing saw their revenue drop by 15 to 20%. So a significant drop when it comes to revenue if the other drops weren't as large. Now, finally, for inflation and debt. This week saw the Russian official inflation, according to Rosstat, be only 0.02%. But for July, inflation is 0.81% because we had high inflation in the first week due to the increase of the increase of rates for utilities across Russia. And inflation for the year so far is 4.61%. In terms of debt, the Russian government had two auctions. In the first auction, it managed to sell 185.446 billion rubles in debt. That was at a yield of 4.64%. So we're seeing another decrease in yield, this time to the middle of the 14th percentile. And that's for the larger auctions that they managed to sell. The second auction was a lot smaller with 14.6 billion rubles sold. And it had a yield, like I said, a lower yield of 14.12%, which is the lowest yield so far in 2025 for Russian debt. Like I said, it's for a lower volume. And I think this is it for the Russian business news for this week.
Well, thank you, Stanimir. Did I understand correctly that North Korea is selling Russia troops and South Korea is selling Russia cars? Is that accurate?
It's better than South Korea building cars in Russia, but yes.
Man, they're really getting the best of both worlds there. Blows my mind. But yeah, thank you. Also, thanks for the egg news. I thought that was very interesting. So I had one question for you. I know you got to run a bit early today. If you got time, do you have time?
Yeah, and I might stay. Actually, my evening for you though.
Good. So I just wanted to ask you, this week, Russia announced they're canceling the Army 2025 Expo. It's a military expo in Russia. I actually talked to you about this a little bit, and you basically said, it's pretty much par for the course these days. They're canceling these expos all the time. So I guess I would just ask you kind of generally, obviously since this is part of a larger pattern, how important is the military, how important is Russia's share of the global arms market? How important is that to the Russian state and the Russian economy?
To the Russian state and the Russian economy, I would say, if you were looking honestly, probably not as important. But for Russian state companies like Rostech, it's vitally important. And I want to point out that something that I didn't mention was that in 2024, they didn't cancel it. They made it only 3 days, but they still had it. And I think that for this year, they had sent invitations to something like 110 countries and 1,500 participants, and they just canceled it almost at the last second. But Russian military exports have actually gone down significantly, despite, let's say, for recently a new frigate being sold to India after it was completed. And they've gone down because Russia can't afford to export any of the production it's making. Almost any. Like I said, for the frigate that they built, yeah, that's going to India.
Yeah, I know India also bought some S-400s like before all this started, and before 2022, and like Russia basically just didn't deliver them, and India like created a parliamentary committee to investigate where their S-400s were, and they've had obviously a lot of delays and problems just because, as you said, they need their military equipment, so they can't really afford to export any right now. So do you think long term, it sounds like what you're saying is like long term, the Russian economy itself won't really be that hurt by Russia losing its international share in the arms market, but there are certain key Russian state companies that will be hurt pretty bad. And I assume also that, like military innovation in Russia will be a lot more difficult because they don't have this robust, international arms exports going on, right?
Well, I think that they're pumping enough money right now in the defense sector that there will be innovation. But in terms of returning to markets, if the conflict concludes and there is a return to the normal spending for defense, or close to the normal spending, or at least significantly lower than it is right now, Russia's defense sector, which has been expanded, will have nowhere to go if it doesn't find export markets, because it's been expanded without any thought how it's going to survive afterwards, with these military facilities pumping out vehicles that no one else needs except for the army.
I just want to add one thing, that a lot of the export has been basically been replaced by technology exports to North Korea, and that's not probably not going to end after any ceasefire or after the war.
Yeah, but that's something that the Russian defense industry doesn't want, another competitor.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not good for them.
But yeah, I think it sounds to me like what both of you are saying is that Russia, it's going to be in Russia's direct interest for the next, decade at least to export military technology and equipment to basically anyone who's willing to pour it. So that's something like use stability in the world, like Europe, and probably take note of. Yeah. Am I not coming through good?
I'm not sure if it was just me, but there was some heavy rubber banding going on there.
Yeah, it's telling me my connection's bad. Sorry about that. Am I coming through now or no?
Yeah, better.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying. Well, it sounds like what both of you guys are saying basically is that in the next 10 years, over the next 10 years, Russia's going to be willing to sell military technology or equipment to basically anyone who's willing to buy it. Like right now, they're willing to sell military technology, but and then if the war ever concludes, as Sandomir said, like they'll need an export market for all this stuff. So that's something that countries like Europe, or countries like the United States and places like Europe should probably take into account. Is that for the next decade at least, Russia is probably going to be directly interested in exporting military technology and equipment to anyone who's willing to pay. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. So next topic I want to talk very quickly about was for Mr. Maurice. Maurice, Russia withdrew from a military cooperation agreement with Germany. They signed an order on July 18th. They first signed the agreement in 1996, and yeah, I don't really have a lot of details about what the agreement stipulated beyond that, but I was just going to ask you if there was any specific news in Germany about the suspension of this agreement.
Yeah, not that I know of. I have no clue what kind of agreement that was. I've never seen any news about it. There was no recent news I have seen about it. And I honestly think if there were any military cooperation going on between our countries since 2022, I think someone would have reported about it in Germany. Yeah, it sounds to me, and I'm really not sure about or what is referring to. It sounds to me like, yeah, this was like kind of our agreements we had, and a lot of agreements between Germany and Russia are just put on ice since 2022, and so it was really just not a nothing burger, but yeah, not necessary or not that important in the first place.
Okay, well, it sounds like they didn't really hurt your feelings by suspending this agreement. So
I have really no clue what is it about, to be honest.
Well, there you have it, folks. The reaction from Germany is muted at best. So I think that was all the topics I wanted to cover this week. I guess there's something I saw kind of mentioned in chat, but I'll just steal it as my own question. So, Mr. Germany, we talked a lot about last week and a little bit this week about them Patriots. There's kind of this agreement about Patriots. So the little development this week was that the Swiss had ordered some Patriots. The U.S. basically said they're going to expedite other orders in Europe that we assume will go to Ukraine first. In other words, the U.S. is putting Switzerland, further back in the line to produce some stuff. Now, my understanding is you talked a little bit to one of our contributors about that, John, and he basically said, well, these things are like the components that are needed to be built still take a while to build. They're, picture like a trailer with a bunch of fancy technology in it. That's kind of what we're talking about here. And the U.S. still has to build those, or, Raytheon or whatever has to build those. So even though the orders will be expedited, it's not going to be like overnight. That's kind of my general understanding. Or is there anything you wanted to clarify there?
Yes, from my conversation or my short writing with him, if I recall correctly, he said that certain components as part of this contract were actually to be manufactured in Switzerland, which now, since Switzerland doesn't allow exports to Ukraine, right, has now to be manufactured in the US instead, which takes up more time. Pessimists like Erlend, for example, say it's a year extra we would have to wait. I would say we just wait and see how long it takes. I just want to say when we actually grab this topic, I don't think it's yet clear, to be honest, and that's why I didn't include it in my news segment at all, where the Patriots actually come from. Because although you said, if I recall correctly, the Washington Post, right, or New York Times, what was it?
I think the Post, but I don't remember.
Yeah, one of these two reported that Germany would give 2 of their own. I know that is what Trump wants, but on the same day, the Washington Post or New York Times or whatever it was put out a story about this, saying that Germany would give 2 from the inventory, although that currently at least seems the most likely. Bild, for example, put out a report on the same day and said, according to their German government news circuits, Germany will only deliver 1 from our own stocks, and the other one originally produced for Switzerland will go to Ukraine. So if that's really the case, and we're not giving 2, and I'm really surprised we're even giving 1, to be honest, then Switzerland would have to, then Ukraine would have to wait what was it, then 18, 19 months in total, starting now for the second Patriot Fire unit financed with Germany, if that were really the case. Because remember, Germany has already given 3 out of our 12 we have. From the remaining ones, one is the schooling system. It's not really an active usage. You basically can't use it really for home defense. We have 2 stationed in Poland, and we have 3 which are currently undergoing maintenance. So we basically have 3 of our 12 we had in 2022 for home defense. And when we're giving another one to Ukraine, we have 2 for home defense out of 12 we had. So, yeah, like I said, I'm surprised we're even giving 1, to be honest, or even considering giving 1.
Yeah, so it's obviously a complicated situation with the Patriots. We still don't have like all the information. Just basically, Trump made this announcement about it, and then Rutte kind of backed him up. And so we'll kind of have to see what the particulars look like. But I think our general impression is obviously it's good news for Ukraine, but it's still probably going to take a while to get all these Patriot batteries together because it's just a complicated situation, as you rightly illustrated. So. Yeah, that's that Patriot topic covered. I think we're going to be covering that for a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
If I may just add one thing. The German MOD, together with the German Minister of Defense, both said that it will take a couple of weeks, maybe even months, until the first one arrives in Ukraine. And right now, they said they're building working groups. So German working groups together with American working groups, and they figure out the details. And they said it will take at least a couple of weeks until we have figured out all the details. So assuming that is correct information, I don't think they actually have like signed contracts or agreements or whatever right now. It's all like mouthpieces. And to my understanding, from what I'm interpreting the statements, announcements in the recent days, it seems like that like every person involved has a different understanding of how it should be played out. I mean, the US is saying Germany's giving 2. I mean, Trump even said there are 17 Patriot Fire units on their way to Ukraine. Like, what of nonsense. And yeah, so my understanding is that everyone has like a different understanding of how it should be turned out, and everyone went public with it because they want to make a good statement, but no details are really figured out yet, or at least nothing signed. So take everything with a grain of salt and just wait for official announcement. I wouldn't consider anything coming from the US official, to be honest. I would just wait for what the Germans are announcing, or the Ukrainians.
I tend to agree with everything that the German aid to Ukraine said there, and I just want to emphasize that it's very important that now, as the US has opened for European acquisition of Patriot systems and other weapons for Ukraine, that those orders are being laid down immediately. yeah, it's going to be difficult to get already built systems into Ukraine very rapidly. And if 2 weeks to a month and a couple of systems in addition is sent to Ukraine by then, I would be very, very happy about that. But people need to remember as well that all those fire units are being used continuously, and Ukraine really has a very big demand for not just replacement parts, but more systems, so that whenever one system will need maintenance, there are other systems coming in that are new and in good conditions. So I'm just happy if this group of countries actually manages to put down orders for 10 fire units right now, so that maybe some new ones will actually roll off the production line in 2026. And the reason why I'm pessimistic about delivery of that Swiss system in particular is if these components were not in the production line and Ukraine isn't prioritized more than what they already are, because they're jumping in the line and basically deprioritizing the Swiss order. If there are not other components that they can do the same thing with, that's going to be complete new orders, new planning, and that's why I'm saying that. And I told Gao that it's probably closer to 12 months than 1 month, and that's based upon the prior deliveries of new fire units from the Patriot production line, right? So, but that doesn't mean that's conclusive. Maybe they can borrow some components of an unused system somewhere. Who knows? But we're just trying to interpret the information that is already out there.
Yeah, I think generally the good news is we're talking about numbers of Patriot systems that can meaningfully defend Ukraine's airspace. Like, I want to say at some point John said something like 8 Patriot systems would be what would be required, generally speaking, to really, but I could be remembering that wrong. But anyway, definitely we're talking about more systems than in the past. And obviously Ukraine needs air defense. Go ahead.
I think that was for Kyiv, mate.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if Ukraine's gonna be protecting the whole country with Patriot systems, both anti-ballistic capabilities for large populated centers and the whole airspace, we're talking about many times more of what they already have. So I don't know the exact number, but 8 is probably more meaningfully able to protect Kyiv. I think that's more what we're talking about here.
Yikes. Well, we're still talking, many times more than the initial discussions when the invasion first started, and when they're talking about 1 or 2, right? So, yeah, that's, I guess, like a positive development in all this, is that at least, even though the logistics still need to be worked out, the numbers of systems being talked about are more realistic than what were being offered before. So that's good. Cool. So we have some questions in chat. So we'll now move to Q&A, unless you guys had any other business this week you wanted to discuss.
We can take some of the questions, but I think some of them are a little bit difficult to answer. We'll try, though.
Yeah. So the first one I see is why did Ukraine launch consecutive drone strikes for 2 or 3 nights? Why not? Or why didn't they do this before? And why did they stop? Like, why not do it all the time? We obviously don't know specifically, but generally speaking, it's probably the case that they build up enough production to have, like, they store up enough to do like a saturation attack, because like generally the goal is you need to put out enough objects in the air to overwhelm their air defense and hit your target, right? So you sort of need like twice as many as you actually are plan to use or whatever.
Is he gone or am I gone?
No, Joseph is coming through.
I'm good?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, my point is generally like it's usually when you're dealing with a situation like this where you're up against an opponent like Russia with good air defenses, you're going to save up as many drones as you can and then throw them at them like in a big, clump so that they can't defend against them meaningfully. Ukraine's in the past has been like, I don't know, it seems like their strategy has been more like send a lot of the time. But it seems like maybe now they have enough production to where they feel it's like a useful strategy to do these burst attacks where for 2 to 3 days they just like shut the country down basically, and launch 200 drones and freak Russia out. That seems to be a newer approach. Like now that they have enough production to do that, that seems to be more of their approach. Whereas before they were taking like, I don't know, 10 biplanes a night or whatever, like weird stuff they could throw together and like just kind of launching it and seeing what happened. And it sort of worked because Russia didn't seem to have a comprehensive understanding of their airspace. And if you just kind of slipped a plane into Russia, a weird biplane drone, sometimes you could just kind of get it through. I would say most of the time you couldn't. Like they saw it coming, and then once you see it coming, it's just slowly heading towards its target, so they can stop it or evacuate or whatever. But I think now that they have the numbers, you're going to see more of these like saturation-based strategies. Erlend, do you want to say anything about that? Like why they do these big wave attacks and then you don't hear much, and then they do more?
I think Ukraine has been testing out various different tactics when it comes to both saturation and attacks and very kind of specialized drone attacks. It's really difficult to answer because we don't sit there at the mission planning center and listen to why they're choosing some tactics over others, right? But I want to just emphasize that it's not only production; it's also mission planning is a big part of this, and Ukraine is also limited to certain amount of mission planners that they have, and if you want to maximize the efficiency of your drone attacks, then you got to plan the attacks well ahead as well. You both need target intelligence, you need intelligence about Russian air defenses, etc. And to put that all into a package together with the actual drones that are ready to be launched, that is a big part of the equation as well.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of people underestimate the level of mission planning required for a strategic level attack. It's really significant. It's one of the things also probably hampering the Russians. Like they have to do for these missile attacks, they have to do like proper mission planning, and it's probably not easy. So yeah, that's a good question from chat. Next question I see in chat was, in the past, I thought Colby had said that many more Patriot batteries could be made if more orders come in, but the new replacement batteries for Germany has meant Swiss ones going back. Yeah, so to clarify, I think Colby has said pretty consistently two things. Number one, they should have placed orders for Patriot batteries to be built like years ago. If they had done this in 2022, we'd be in a better position now where we'd have some coming off the line now, whereas we've got to kind of wait now until they're actually built. And then the other thing is that there's a bunch of Patriot batteries that need refurbishing in the US. Like there's a ton of Patriot batteries, but they're sitting in warehouses. They have old software. They have old hardware. They need to be kind of refitted and made sure that they still work and all that. And again, that process probably normally would take about a year. Maybe if you really accelerate it, 6 to 8 months or something. So we should have been doing that a year ago, right? So it's just a matter of like, we do have the capacity to have more Patriot batteries for Ukraine, but it does take a while to kind of get all that lined up. And we're still kind of waiting. This is the first indication that they are serious about actually like doing this, but that process is going to take a while. Erlend, did you want to clarify anything? That's basically Colby's position, yeah?
Yeah, and then there's been this constant complaint about why Europe hasn't done this before. So now Europe is putting up money for putting those orders down, right? And I think there's been this really naive hope from Europe that the US magically, don't even consider which administration is there right now, that the US magically would get this problem out of the way. And with none of the administrations that has been in the US since 2022, there's been any meaningful solution to this problem coming up from within the US. And when Europe has been waiting this long to put down the orders, because we can assume at least that if Europe ordered Patriot batteries for Ukraine, newly produced ones 3 years ago, that if they were approved, it would have been kind of a fixed problem. Then that's why it's taking so long right now. It's orders just been putting down or being in the process of being put down by European countries, and there's basically no quick fix to that, right? So we just have to be patient and wait for those systems. In the meantime, you have to also continue to emphasize the importance that European countries understand that we have to fix these things as soon as possible. We have to actually make very large capital sums available for putting down orders, not just from the US, but from our own industry, and not just trying to fix, crisis emergency situations when it's already too late. So hopefully there's a change, and we will see very large contracts being stipulated in weapons industry for Ukraine, paid by Europe as soon as possible, not just Patriots.
Yeah, I think, it's very clear, especially from the statements this week from France and Italy, both basically saying we don't endorse this plan specifically because it involves like shelling out the money for US equipment instead of investing in European capacity. In my opinion, the problem is with both France and Italy, they're all talk, right? In other words, they are unwilling to shell out for Patriot systems, meaning, basically from the US. And they talk about, well, we want to send Ukraine SAM-T. And it's like they didn't make any parallel announcement that they're going to invest another $2 billion in SAM-T systems for Ukraine, right? Like, in other words, they talk a big game about like building stuff in Europe and arming Ukraine with European weapons. But when it comes to actually investing in the capacity to build them at scale, we get these kind of French, like order. They're either keeping it a complete secret and sending quantities to Ukraine that are reasonable, but more likely what we hear publicly is that they're sending very small quantities of this stuff to Ukraine. Nothing on the scale that is needed in Ukraine, right? We're not talking about 8 Patriot systems like we are in the Patriot side of things. We're talking about maybe 1 or 2 SAM-T systems. So, that's the issue with buying European now for certain things. Obviously, there are certain things Europe has, but air defense systems, especially with anti-ballistic capability, are something that are pretty hard to come by in Europe at scale. So that's, I don't know, kind of the issue. And I think no one wants to be a Russia, right? Which is kind of what Standomir was illustrating. They just spent all their money on as much short-term, like bolstering of military production as they possibly can. They're investing in chemical plants to, process ammonia to build explosives, and they're building artillery and all that stuff. They're just money for immediate solution of war. They're the back and Europe has tried to keep its situation, but man, my connection's bad. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop bringing on, but the point is, overall development for Europe, but they need to focus and deliver at scale.
Yeah, thanks. We got a visit from Robo Joseph again, but I think most of it came through. I'll go to the next question then, and I think we will have to take a rain check on this one because I don't know off my hand anything about this. Yeah. So Broadcast Cat asks, the UK have announced plans to buy F-35. I guess this is about the new plans, so additional orders of F-35. And then now I hear that the US has sent tactical nuclear guide bomb to Lakenheath. Thoughts? Again, I'm not aware of this. Need to check out. Maybe Daniela can come back to this next stream.
Yep, more of a Colby or Daniela question, and we don't have the personnel here, unfortunately.
Yep. Anyways, I can comment that it's definitely crucial for Europe to have a tactical nuclear capability. I would want to see that not dependent on the US, because if the US withdraws its tactical nuclear capability from Europe, then Russia has somewhat of an advantage, because we don't, like France and the UK does not have any national tactical nuclear capabilities. So that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I think France and the UK have already some plans with that to regards to that issue. Okay.
Oh, good.
I think I can answer this one from Kellen. What is the real facts about Ukraine's interceptor drones? Are they mass produced yet, and how effective? So there are two kind of different tranches of interceptor drones. One is the ones we've seen Artem tracking for over a year now. Basically, most of them being quadcopters intercepting Russian surveillance drones and strike drones like the Zala and Molnia, and also some Gerbera drones. Those are very effective, and Ukraine has large success with intercepting these kind of drones. When it comes to Shahed drones, there's been a lot of talk about it in the media. There's definitely things going on in Ukraine. Lots of different approaches have been tried, but I would like to say that from what we can see, it is not very effective yet. I'm not sure if that is only about the techniques being used, so the technology and the tactics being used, or if it has to do with scale. But from open public information, Ukraine is scaling up that capacity. So maybe they've found a solution that works and is proven to work, and then basically trying to scale that. But it is a different question than intercepting these slower, smaller drones that they've already been quite successful in doing. I think we got to be real about this Shahed problem, and realistic, and understand that it's never going to be we're never going to find a one single solution to the problem. There's going to be have to be several tranches of or layers of different air defenses that are not as expensive as traditional ground to air launched missiles that can intercept these. So AAA, or basically machine guns and autocannons, shooting down Shaheds like they've done for years now, combined with interceptor drones, electronic warfare, maybe even some high energy capacity weapons like laser or microwave weapons. Who knows? I think there's going to be and we have to see a lot of solutions being used at the same time to actually have an effective shield against these kind of drones. And it's going to be really hard, and it's going to take time. So I've seen a lot of hype of interceptor drones against Shaheds, but we have not seen any proof yet that it's super effective and is basically taking down most of the drones. That is not something we've seen.
Yeah, I want to say I was looking for the actual statement, but the president mentioned in one of his recent speeches that like they had taken out maybe 400 total with like interceptor drones, and I don't remember. I'm sure there's some specifics there, but I assume he means like strategic, drones that are striking the cities. But yeah, like Russia launches 400 objects in a night, right? So that's the issue, as Erlend said, is scale. We've definitely seen it done, but not on any scale where it's going to start meaningfully like countering what Russia's doing. And we hope they do. As Erlend said, there's a lot of different technologies that have potential in this area to protect Ukrainian cities, and we'll probably see some combination of all of them at the end of this. And hopefully they can scale up quickly and effectively like they have with their offensive drone program. And we'll see how it goes. There was another question about why is Sweden afraid to give Gripens? They don't want to check them. So my recollection of the Gripen situation is that Sweden offered Ukraine Gripens, but this was basically at the time that Ukraine was already being told they were going to get F-35s, and also France was offering Mirage.
Maybe not F-35s. I hope so.
Sorry, F-16s. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. We were talking about F-35s earlier. So Ukraine was already being F-16s. Oh my God, were already on the table, and Ukraine, I think, rightly decided that they could only manage one weapons platform, maybe two, at the most, and because of that, they sort of turned down Gripen. But my general understanding was like Sweden was ready to definitely at least talk about getting them Gripens like quickly. And it sounded like they were ready to just straight up give them a bunch of Gripens. And Ukraine basically said, and this makes sense, right? Like the logistical footprint of an airplane, keeping airframes like that is really high. So if Ukraine had to suddenly maintain 3 different aircraft, that would be really difficult for them in the situation they're in. That's the reason, as far as I understand, why Gripens didn't go to Ukraine. It was basically Sweden offered them, and Ukraine said no. Erlend, you as they're your neighbor, do you want to comment on this at all?
So I think that's the political correct explanation, and then if we go to the non-political correct explanation, it's that at the time when which kind of fighters we were to provide to Ukraine was being decided, the US was very against the Gripens being provided to Ukraine. And one of the reasons would be that the Gripens possibly could be outfitted with a radar and missiles that have a range that the US was very uncomfortable with at the time. So the Gripens can be outfitted with a Meteor missile, which would be able to intercept Russian airplanes far into Russia. And the non-political correct explanation is that the US did not want that, and they basically said to Sweden and everyone else involved in this, so the whole fighter jets to Ukraine coalition, being Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, and now France, supported also by the US, of course, basically said to Ukraine, you're getting the F-16s, but you're not getting the Gripens. Please make a statement to kind of tone down the reasons for why the Gripens are not coming. That is a different explanation that has not been confirmed by any official sources, but that is possibly why as well. Maybe we will see a change to that. The Swedes like to do things in the dark, so who knows? But it is very difficult and time-consuming to train pilots, and right now they've committed a lot of fighter pilots to be trained on F-16s and Mirage. So it's not just like, hey, we have some Gripens for you here. If you want them, you can have them, and it's not that easy, unfortunately.
Well, there you go. We got 2 explanations. You got the public one and possibly the secret rumored one. Any other questions, Erlend?
I'm scrolling.
Kellen?
Well, I just want to emphasize this. Kellen had the questions about the interceptor drones earlier, and follows up with definitely the correct answer, right? Yes, it seems that Ukraine needs to take out the production sites of Shahed and missile production rather than interception alone. How realistic is this with Neptune plus drones, etc.? So we've talked about the Shahed factory before, Joseph, and it's not an easy target because it's very far away, and it is far beyond any of the missiles Ukraine have at this time, and it's not something you can just destroy with a couple of small drones. You need significant payload capacity and several ordnance that to be able to actually meaningfully destroy the factory. And my fear is that Russia is going to preemptively distribute these kind of production sites, basically as a response to Operation Spider's Web, because they've seen now that they are vulnerable, even deep into Russia, several thousands of kilometers into Russia, and that it's going to be exceedingly more difficult to destroy these facilities. But yeah, that is the correct solution to the problem. But to arrive to that solution is very complicated right now.
Yeah, I think another big part of the problem is, right, when Ukraine so far has had a lot of success with their drone program because they're very smart about their targets. Like when they hit an oil facility, they hit like the fuel catalyzer, and it turns out that fuel catalyzer was full of explosive stuff, so it just went boom like a light, and then it's really hard to replace. Like they're under sanctions, they cost $1 billion, they take a year to build, and they take another 6 months to install, and you got to shut the whole thing down. Like the Shaheds just aren't built that way. They're built mostly by unskilled labor. You need a couple of supervisors who kind of understand materials and like what they're doing. But overall, it's like you basically take a bunch of interns and you take a bunch of like migrant laborers from Africa, you throw them in like, a sort of like hangar type factory, and you put them to work, and like the issue is like it's hard to destroy that with a really smart, clever drone attack. You can, but it's it's going to be tricky compared to some of the other things that Ukraine's been able to pull off before. So yeah, I don't know. It's something that's kind of spooky. Ukraine definitely can disrupt that production though. Like if they can get enough drones on that facility, then it's going to disrupt their operations and slow them down. And for example, we did see this week possibly that they're building their own motors in Russia, which is kind of significant. If they could maybe hit that motor factory, that could do some damage, right? So there are certain key components that they can still disrupt, but overall, it's a pretty tough target as far as targets go.
Yeah, generally factories is a very difficult targets, and especially when it's not that difficult to build, right? You don't need a super high tech industry facility to build these things, and also you don't need a lot of very heavy, big, expensive machines. So that's why the Iranians went with this kind of platform in the first place, right?
Yep, that's right. Okay, anything else?
Well, I think we went through most of them.
Yeah, I think I guess just a couple of things. One person mentioned that Perun, who I think mostly makes pretty good stuff, put out a good video on intercepting drones. I would also mention, of course, that we had Artem's interview with the Dronefall project. I think that's a really good source of information about this, because it is a topic that is starting to gain traction, I think, in like Western media, this like drones intercepting drones stuff.
Yep, I think that interview that we had with the people at Come Back Alive is probably the most detailed piece of audio you can find about drone interceptions happening in Ukraine right now. So yeah, if you're super interested in interceptions, then go listen to that. It's quite long, very detailed, but the people from Dronefall, they answer basically every question in detail that Artem had or anyone from the panel had. So go and check that out. It's a couple of months ago, and you'll find it in our YouTube streams archive. I think it's on Spotify as well.
Yeah, pretty sure it is. And also Gesh's article. It's about kind of Russian troop deployments near Armenia. Is that right?
Yeah, he published an article around 10 days ago. If you're interested in some weird kind of behind the headlines info about Russian strategic positioning, I guess, then go and check out Gescher's work. Super interesting stuff.
Yep. So yeah, the interview is on YouTube and Spotify. Yeah, we'll maybe throw the link up or put it in the old chat, or the comments or the description or whatever. And yeah, Geshe's article is on the website Tochnyi.info if you guys want to check that out. Cool. So I think that about wraps it up for us this week. Anyone have anything else before I close out? Okay.
Just like a final thought, we need to get real about allocating real funds for defense and industry in Europe right now. Like I've seen the French being still like, hey, we don't want to participate in this and that program. Please buy weapons from us. Don't buy weapons from anyone else. Like, shit is real already. We need to get these egoistic political postures out of our heads. It's 3 years and more into this full-scale war in Europe, and we're still complaining or arguing about who is going to get what piece of industry, and it needs to end. We need to just get those orders down and quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to fund weapons in Europe, Ukraine has said they still have billions of dollars in weapons production capacity, and it's last time I checked, Ukraine is in Europe, so maybe that's one option right there. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Erlend. Hopefully, we'll see all countries involved, including my own country of the United States, take the matter of transatlantic security more seriously and help the good Ukrainian people resist the invasion of their country. And hopefully that will deter other crazy countries in the future from invading countries and disrupting our economies and disrupting our livelihoods and all that stuff. And yeah, it'll be nice if we could live in a slightly more peaceful, stable world as a result. So on that note, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thanks everyone, of course, for tuning in this week. We appreciate you guys stopping in, asking all your great chat questions. We appreciate you, chat. We appreciate all your questions. It's always good for us to understand what you want to know more about. So thanks for that. Thanks, of course, to our panel. It's our regular panel here every week. Myself, Germanade, Stanimir, and Erlend holding down the fort, doing all the work. So thanks, everyone, for all of your hard work this week on the stream. And thanks, of course, to our video on demand audience. We know not everyone can make it to the stream every Sunday at 2100 Kyiv time. So if you watch the video after the fact, we appreciate you too. So of course, as I said, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see everyone next week. Yes.
Yeah, I noticed you want to close up the stream, but thinking you have missed one person to thank.
I thanked myself. I included
You did?
myself in the panel. Yes.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Erlend,
Then, sorry.
is that accurate? I said thank you to the panel, and I included myself, technically thanking myself.
Yeah.
Yes, he even heard it.
He half-heartedly agreed with me, so
Yeah,
therefore
sure.
I'm bulletproof.
Yeah,
cool.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I thanked myself. This is all recorded. I want the admins to check the logs. I thanked myself. So yes, thank you myself, and thanks everyone. We'll see everyone next week, 2100 Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Slava.
Slava.
On behalf of the brave.